Okay, so the study guide for the midterm. Okay, like I said, this is your document. You can add whatever you want to it, type whatever you want. It's yours, and you'll be able to use this on the midterm if you'd like to. But let me go over the stuff that's on the judicial branch, which we officially haven't covered yet. But it will. You'll have a few questions on those about the judicial branch on the midterm. Okay. So the first one that's listed here is original intent. Okay. Now, you guys, when it comes to judges, the judicial branch is in charge of saying what the Constitution means. And there's two schools of thought on that. Okay. The first one is the Constitution was written in 1787. It's not 1787, it's 2021. The Constitution doesn't apply in 1789, I meant to say 1789 instead of 1787. 1789, it applies to 2021. Therefore, the Constitution has to change with the times, and the meaning will change based on what judges decide and what Congress passes and what the president puts out as an agenda. Okay, that is not original intent. Okay, original intent is the other school of thought, which is the Constitution means exactly what the words say. You don't add any words in between. You don't interpret it differently. It means exactly what it says. If you want to change the meaning of the Constitution, do what the Constitution says, which is add an amendment. Okay? So, original intent people look at the exact wording in the original meaning of the Constitution. That's what they say is what the Constitution means. It doesn't change with the times. If you want it to change with the times, again, add an amendment to change the interpretation of the Constitution. Okay. One court case, I'm going to highlight it here, that original intent judges hate is Roe versus Wade. Okay. Roe versus Wade is the Supreme Court case that legalized abortion in the first trimester of a pregnancy. Okay. They may or may not necessarily be against abortion, but the reason they hate this case is because the Supreme Court, the winning judges on that side of that case in Roe versus Wade said there is a right to privacy in the Constitution. And because we have a right to privacy, then a woman can determine whether or not to continue a pregnancy during the first trimester. That's an absolute right. It cannot be taken away by government. Okay, the original intent people said, okay, show us the word privacy in the Constitution. It's not there. The word privacy does not appear in the Constitution. So original intent people say, then it's not a right. You can't make it up. Okay, the judges that were behind the winning side of Roe versus Wade were of the people that feel that the viewpoint that the Constitution should change with the times. Okay, so original intent people say, if you want a right to privacy in the Constitution, well, then add an amendment that says we have the right to privacy and spell it out in an amendment. Okay. All right. Amicus curiae brief. When you study the legal profession or anything that deals with judges and court cases, there's a lot of Latin in there. They take a lot of stuff from Latin. You don't need to know the Latin interpretation. We got amicus curiae. The next one is stare decisis. We've got, later on, we'll talk about certiorari. Okay, so what amicus curiae briefs mean, it's a friend of the court brief. Okay, a brief is a written summary of a side in a legal case. So when somebody appeals their or starts a case in a court, the judge will ask for their briefs. Give me a summary of your argument. And then lawyers on both sides write it down and hand it to the judge. Okay. Usually briefs are filed by people that are directly involved in the case. In other words, it's the person on trial, the person being sued, whatever, or their lawyer. Okay. The Supreme Court allows for friends of the court briefs. They have to call for them. So they'll say, okay, in this case, we're taking amicus curiae briefs. Okay. Friend of the court briefs are legal opinions, summaries that are written by people and given to the court, but they're not directly involved in the case. Okay. For instance, if it's a free speech case, the American Civil Liberties Union might say, yeah, we're not one of the lawyers in this case, but here's why we think, judges, you should vote this way on this case. And they would file a brief. Okay. So it's a way to what they call lobby the court. Okay. That's an important word there, lobbying the court. Lobbying, actually, there are people that are lobbyists, but they work with members of Congress and they try to persuade them to vote in favor or against legislation. Well, you're not allowed to go into a judge's chamber and say, hey, let's talk about this for a second. You know, I got an offer you won't be able to refuse here. You know, you can't do that with a judge. So what you do is you give them a written summary of your argument. And that's an amicus curiae brief if you are not directly one of the parties in the case. Okay. All right. Stare decisis means let the decision stand. Okay. The Supreme Court of the United States is all about precedent. Okay. One of the last things I have on here, an idea, is that the Supreme Court rejects most of the cases appealed to it. And I mean about 98% of the cases appealed to the Supreme Court, they reject them, which means they don't hear the case. Okay. So they only take the ones they take, the 1 or 2% they take are the really, really important cases. The one that decide things like whether or not same-sex couples can marry, whether or not segregation is legal in education. Those are the big cases that they take. Okay. And when they decide those cases, their decision becomes what they call precedence. Okay. Precedence is, the legal standard that all other courts have to follow. So once they decided in Brown versus the Board of Education that segregation in education was unconstitutional, that was a call. Not only did the people win the case, but it was a call to all the other judges. You have to decide any segregation case using Brown versus the board as your framework. Okay, that legal argument. Basically, that's called precedent. Another word for it is stare decisis. It means let the decision stand. So when the Supreme Court says something, by God, you got to listen. Okay, it's like when Congress passes a law. You know, you have to follow the law. Okay. All right, let's move on to some of these court cases. Okay, the Dred Scott decision. Those of you that were in APUSH last year probably know this case. Okay, and Dred Scott, the decision, it was one of the things that led to the Civil War. Dred Scott was a slave. He went with his owner. His owner, I think Virginia, North Carolina, South Carolina, in that area, one of those slave states in that area. The doctor was called into service in the Army. The owner, who was a doctor, was called into service in the Army. That doctor took Dred Scott with him to a place called Fort Snelling, which is in not Wisconsin. Minnesota. I'm sorry, Minnesota. And Minnesota was a free territory. So Dred Scott, once he gets to Minnesota, says, I'm free because I'm in free territory. And he sued for his freedom. The case went to the U.S. Supreme Court. The U.S. Supreme Court eventually said, no, you're not free. In fact, the Chief Justice at the time, Roger Taney, who was a notorious racist, said, yeah, not only are you not free, but we're going to take it a step further. The Constitution only applies to white people. It does not apply to slaves or freed slaves. Okay, and that was one of the things that led to the formation of the Republican Party and the election of Lincoln and the Civil War. So just to let you know that that decision, that stare decisis, that precedent under Dred Scott was removed by the 14th Amendment. I hope one of the things you've learned this year is that the 14th Amendment says that if you're born in the United States, then you're a citizen. And if you're a citizen, no government can take away your rights. That overturned the Dred Scott decision. Dred Scott was a slave, yes, but he was born in the United States. So after the Civil War, he got his freedom and his rights by the 14th Amendment. Okay. All right, next one, Miranda versus Arizona. Miranda is you probably heard of Miranda rights before. If somebody is arrested by the police brought in for questioning, they have to be read their Miranda rights. You have the right to remain silent. You have the right to an attorney. Anything that you say will be used against you in a court of law. Okay, that was made a precedent by the Miranda versus Arizona. Okay, Gideon versus Wainwright is another precedent. Gideon versus Wainwright said that it incorporated the idea that if somebody is placed on trial, whether it's in a state court, a local court, or a federal court, if they can't afford an attorney, then the state has to provide them with an attorney. Okay, it created the public defender system. Gideon was a guy that had to defend himself for a robbery. He got the maximum sentence, and he got a new trial because he didn't have a lawyer. And he appealed to the Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court said, you have to have a lawyer. And he was retried with a lawyer, and he was found guilty again. But at least when he was found guilty the second time, he had representation. Okay, let's see. Lemon test. That goes back to, in prior restraint, those go back to the First Amendment. Okay, First Amendment says the government is not allowed to get involved in religion, but the Supreme Court, in a precedent, set up the lemon test. It's a 3-part test that said that if you can answer no to these 3 things, then the government is allowed to get involved in religion. Okay. You may have heard of Matthew 25 Ministries before. Okay, Matthew 25 Ministries is obviously by its name is a religious-based organization. One of the things that Matthew 25 Ministries does is takes collection of food, furniture, clothes, and helps people that have been harmed by a natural disaster. So if a tornado rips through a town, Matthew 25 Ministries will put a call out and say, we need to go down to this town and we need to provide water and clothing for these folks, because they are basically left with nothing but the clothes on their back. Okay, there's nothing religious about that. Helping people in need is a non-religious function. Okay, so that would actually that would pass the lemon test because it doesn't get the government involved and entangled in religion. Okay, another example would be let me think. If Matthew 25 Ministries decides, hey, with your water, we're going to give you a Bible to go along with that, that violates the lemon test, because the Bible then is furthering a religion. It's not. It's getting the government entangled in religion. Okay, prior restraint is part of the freedom of the press. Okay, prior restraint is. In a prior restraint, the government is allowed to prevent the publication of, for instance, national secrets. So if a newspaper gets, or a magazine or a website gets, plans for our attack on Iran that's going to happen 6 months from now, and says, oh, we're going to publish this, the government can prevent them from being published. Okay, that's called a prior restraint. 99% of the time, prior restraint is not allowed unless it's extreme national secrets. Okay. All right. Now let's look under issues and ideas. Okay. Federal judges, they serve for life. Once they're appointed by the president and approved by the Senate, they serve for life. As long as they are alive, they're a judge. So if you appoint somebody to the Supreme Court who might be 45 years old, I know to you guys that might seem old, but that's relatively young, especially if you live, let's say that person lives to be 90. They can be on the court for 45 years. That's happened before. Okay. The person that used to be the longest serving person on the Supreme Court, the longest serving current judge, he passed away a few years ago. He was appointed by Ronald Reagan, President Ronald Reagan. President Reagan died in 2004. His term had been long up at that point, but that judge was still on the bench. So this is a way for presidents to impact impact the government even after they leave office, even after they've passed away. Okay, let's see. Filibuster, that's all, we've gone over that. Okay, Supreme Court rejects, we did this already. The Supreme Court rejects most cases. If you appeal your case to the Supreme Court, got a 2% chance basically of them taking your case. That is something that, you beat the odds. And I want you guys to think of the the black armband case, the high school students that said, oh, we were suspended for wearing these armbands during our protests of the Vietnam War. The fact that the Supreme Court took their case, they had a 98% chance of getting rejected by the court. The court took their case and voted that they did have their First Amendment rights were taken away, and they were, their rights were violated. So they really beat the odds on that one. Okay. All right. Does anybody have any questions about anything that is on that study guide, even the stuff we didn't go over? Anybody have any questions? Go ahead and shout them out or put them in the chat room. Are we good? Okay. I'm going to hand it over to Miss J, and she is going to talk about some current events that are going on.
So I'm excited because there is a lot going on in the government and just like in society in general today. So I was just going to cover over some of the things that we've been talking about in some of our other classes, but has anybody heard what is going on in Georgia right now and why it's so important?
The two Senate candidates came too close in votes for it to be officially decided one way or the other. So they're having a runoff between the two highest vote, or the people who earned the two highest votes.
Exactly. So it's Raphael Warwick and John Ossoff, and they're both Democratic. And at the moment, the one has been projected as the winner, and the other one is leading as they finish counting up those ballots. So it's looking at the moment like it is going to be the two Democratic senators are going to win. And this is really big because the Senate sits at 50 Republicans right now and 48 Democrats. So if the two Democrats win, that is going to make it 50-50. And then does anyone know what would happen then with who would be the majority party then in the Senate? So do you remember who is the president of the Senate who casts tie-breaking votes if there so happens to be a tie?
Vice President?
Yes, absolutely. So it would be Kamala Harris. She just got elected as a Democrat, so she is obviously going to vote and cast her tie-breaking ballot along with the Democratic Party. And that's going to be really big because the Senate is going to vote for majority leader and minority leader. And at the moment, the majority leader is Mitch McConnell, a Republican. But if it comes down to a 50-50 vote for a new either Democratic majority leader or keeping Mitch McConnell, the tie-breaking vote is going to be cast by Kamala Harris, who is a Democrat. So if that happens, it will then swing to a Democratic majority in the Senate, which will affect a lot of different things. It was really interesting because people have had a lot of, which kind of goes into our next point, but a lot of, contention with this election. A lot of people feel very kind of upset about it and feel like there's a lot of election fraud. But the man who was in charge of Georgia's election, I watched him over lunch, like he stood up there. His name is Gabriel Sterling, and he talked about how, this election shouldn't have been a partisan issue because the important thing is like that should matter to both sides.
Emily, we've lost your audio. There you go.
Does it work now?
Yeah, we can hear you.
Okay, sorry, my AirPod died, so my headphone stopped working. Oh, but he was just saying that the important part of this is that there was a fair, that there was election, that there was no fraud, and he guaranteed like the voters of Georgia that this was a very tight election. It was, correctly run. There was no voter fraud, and whoever comes out of this is the correct winner. So just him talking about that kind of plays then into the other big thing that is happening today. January 6th is when the House and the Senate come together to confirm the electoral ballots cast by the Electoral College. And normally we talk about this as usually just one big formality. Nobody really contests them. The states have already declared who the winner is of that state, and that's just kind of what it is. However, this year, there is a ton of people that believe that the election had some fraud in it. At the moment, there's like 30 or 40,000 people in DC outside the White House that are protesting the election results, saying that Donald Trump really is the winner. So today in the Senate, when they go to confirm these states, there's going to be senators who stand up and reject certain states' election results. And does anyone have any idea what states they're going to contest?
Wisconsin, is that one of them?
Mm-hmm. It'll be Wisconsin, Arizona, Georgia.
You guys, I just checked online, a live feed. They've gotten to Arizona. They do states in alphabetical order. So, they've done Alaska and Arkansas, and they got to Arizona, and as a representative objected. And so now they have to have debate on that. That's how this works. So they're debating whether or not to certify those votes. They'll have a debate, and I think the debate lasts for like 2 hours, and then up to 2 hours, and then they'll take a vote whether or not to take those to accept those votes or not. So if when they put Alaska's in, any objections? No. Okay, they're in. When they got to Arizona, somebody objected, and now that because they objected, they have to have a debate. And this is normally this takes like an hour or two. It's going to take, they might even have it done by midnight tonight, to certify this election. So what they'll do is they'll say, okay, after the Arizona debate on the Arizona votes is over, they'll then take a vote. Well, they're going to vote to accept them, because why? Majority wins. That's my clue. Why would they vote to accept those? Who's in the majority? What party is in the majority? Anybody. It's the Democrats. So they'll vote to accept those.
Yeah, so that's one of the big things that's going on right now. And they're going to be, like Mr. Ficker said, contesting the states that had the really close election results back in November, and the ones that President Trump has already like verbally been contesting throughout the news and stuff. So Arizona is the first big one of those. Does anyone have any idea like why, like Mr. Ficker said, like it's probably not going to come anything out of this. They're going to vote to accept them once the debate is done. But why would senators still want to take that stance and show their support for Donald Trump's victory, even if it won't really have anything come out of it? Anyone have an idea? We talked about in the last class how a lot of these senators, in another 4 years, there'll be another election and they're going to want to gain support. And President Trump has got a very strong following. Like we said, there's 40,000 people in front of the Capitol building, White House right now, in DC. So that is a whole bunch of people that these senators are going to want to gain support from in the future when they either want to run again or try and run for president as well. And then the last thing that happened, has anyone heard about what has been happening in Kenosha, Wisconsin with the Black Lives Matter and police brutality instances? So this man, Jacob Blake, was shot. He's 29. He's shot 7 times in the back, and he's alive, but he's paralyzed from the waist down. And yesterday, the prosecution said that they were not going to charge the 3 police officers involved in this. 2 of them were just there, like, assisting, and then the 3rd police officer actually was the one that fired 7 times. And they're not going to charge any of the officers, so they will not be going to trial. And so there has been a lot of public outcry for this because people feel that there should be more justice. These police officers should stand trial, and that is unfair in this situation. Did anyone have any comments or questions about what was going on with that, or commentary on it? The last time I checked the news, the Kenosha news source reported that all protests have been peaceful, though, thus far. I don't know if that's changed since then, but I know that the people feel very strongly about this. And there's been, quite a few instances of it this summer, and in the past few years as well. But I didn't know if you had anything else you wanted to add on that either, Mr. Thicker, or if anyone had questions. Awesome. Well, is there anything else that's happening right now in the news that you had any questions about? We kind of hit the big 3 that have happened yesterday and today.
Donald Trump asking for 11,780 votes. Is that real?
Yes, it was recorded by the Secretary of State of Georgia, who's a Republican. And it happened on Saturday, I want to say, or Friday. He's like, it was, if you get a chance to listen to the phone call, because a recording. Landon, have you listened to it at all?
Yeah, I saw it on TikTok.
Okay, so I don't know if it was an edited version that you saw or the full version, and you could tell this is a real call. He called and this is not the first time that he called the Secretary of State in Georgia. I think he's called him 11 times or 12 times since the election, since Election Day, which he's not supposed to do. The law says that public officials, no matter if they're a mayor or a city council person or governor of state, they are not allowed to interfere with the electoral process. Okay, so not even supposed to call them and say, hey, how's the wife and kids, stuff like that. You're supposed to stay out of that. So he's called that person, at least 11 times and asked, he's like, listen, all I need for you to do is define Landon, what was the number? How many votes?
11,780.
Was that a number you made up? What the heck?
I'm pretty sure it's from the video.
I knew it was close to 11,000.
Why did he set a specific number? Why did he say a specific number? The president did.
I don't know.
That's the number of votes he lost by. That would give him a 1-vote majority. And then he would get those electoral college votes. But again, even if the Secretary of State were to say, all right, Mr. President, you're the president, I'll do whatever you say, which he didn't do. He basically told the president the data doesn't support your statements, any of your statements that you made. And again, remember, these are folks from the same political party. Even if he said, all right, I'll turn it your way, would that be enough to give President Trump 270?
No.
No, it wouldn't. He still would be short. He'd still need another state, Pennsylvania or something like that.
Doesn't that clarify that he's the one trying to ensue voter fraud and it wasn't Joe Biden then?
Yeah, well, he did it in a way where he was saying that there is voter fraud in your state and you're not doing anything about it to the Secretary of State. So he turned the tables on him. So he, but I know if you read between the lines, Lana, what you're saying is the president is trying to do voter fraud because he's saying, get me, 11,000 some odd, number of votes. Find them. That's all I'm asking you to do. Is that voter fraud?
Yeah.
Okay, in your opinion, that is, yeah. So, so that's what's going on there. And he recorded the secretary. It wasn't, done in a shady manner. The Secretary of State recorded the call. I don't know if he told the president he was recording the call or not, but I would assume, every time the president makes a call from the White House, they make a transcript of it. But he recorded the call. You can tell the Secretary of State's lawyer was next to him because his answers were really very, very reserved, I thought. I don't know, Landon, I don't if you felt the same way, but I just thought, why doesn't he just hang up on the just hang up the phone? Sorry, I can't help you. Click.
I saw some speculation on the internet talking about whether or not what he's doing right now is considered treason, because there was like some weird people and they were going through like what classifies as treason and whether or not this would be. And someone said that interfering with an election could be considered treason.
I think it depends on there's such a wide definition of treason. I think that, to me, treason would be betraying your country, So if we're at war with another country, you turn Benedict Arnold and you either switch sides or maybe you leak information out from the government, that tells classified secrets, or you publicly you say the name of some undercover CIA agents or something like that. Okay, to me that's treason. This I wouldn't constitute it as treason. I'm not saying it's illegal, but tampering with the elections is a felony. It's not treason. It's a felony. So if I were to go vote twice willingly and knowingly and try to get away with it, I would be charged with a felony, and my right to vote would be taken away in Ohio. So I don't know if it's, I don't know if I would call it treason. I would say if, if his supporters that are in front of the White House, the 30,000 or whatever, he said, all right, get your guns, let's go up to the White House, or I'm sorry, not the White House, the Capitol building, and show them who's boss. That would be treason.
Okay.
Going off of what Landon said, though, if for some reason the Secretary of State of Georgia was able to find those votes, just the fact that he was able to turn the election around in one state, wouldn't that make people suspicious of other states? Is that possibly what he was trying to do, because he's not going to win, even if the secretary does it?
Right. And I also, that is correct. That's a good statement. And I also want you to think, what would happen if all of a sudden the Secretary of State said, oh, we were wrong, we're turning this one around, Trump won the state? How do you think that would go over?
Well, not very well on one hand, but very well on the other hand, which seems to be for the other party, which seems to be this entire election in a nutshell.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's true. That's true. So he's grabbing at straws is what he's doing. He's lost, and it's going to be formalized today. I mean, it's going to be officially, we've certified this election. The Republicans who are going to, object to the certification of the election can do that. They don't have the numbers. They're going to lose, and honestly, they don't have any evidence either. So. Any other questions? Any other comments? Okay, let's call it a day. How about it? Okay, and just to let you guys know, not next Wednesday, but third quarter, when we start these, every Wednesday remote learning, I'm going to try to have some kind of constitutional issue for you guys to argue. So put you in breakout rooms and argue with one another and see if we can come up to any kind of conclusion. Okay. I'm working on that. All right, any questions? All right, everybody have a good day. And if you have any questions about any of the assignments or especially the midterm, just let me know. And if you need to, like, if you want to do something face-to-face, video-wise, and you're not available during my office hours, but you're available, at 7:30 in the evening, just let me know. I can make special arrangements to connect with you that way. Okay.